First contact misjudged. Supreme Commander Zeril stood before the Varaxian High Council, his eight-limbed form perfectly still as the holographic display showed footage of peculiar vessels moving through the darkness of space. The immense chamber, with its soaring crystal arches and ancient star maps etched into the walls, fell silent as the council members observed the crude metal ships. These vessels were discovered at the edge of the Orion Spur, Zeril reported, his voice resonating through the chamber. They call themselves humans and hail from a planet they name Earth. Our preliminary analysis suggests they've only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last 50 cycles. High Elder Mira, the eldest and most respected of the council, leaned forward, her iridescent scales glimmering under the pale blue light. Their technological development level. Rudimentary, Zeril replied confidently. Their ships use primitive fusion drives, and their weapons are based on simple kinetic principles, metal projectiles, and chemical explosives. They have basic shielding technology, but nothing that could withstand even our scout vessels. The council members exchanged glances, some with expressions of amusement, others with dismissive gestures of their secondary limbs. Yet another species stumbling into the stars, remarked Councillor Thex, his voice dripping with condescension. We've encountered dozens like them. They'll either fall into line or face extinction like the others. Science Director Vela, however, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Unlike the others, her wide eyes reflected concern rather than contempt. If I may speak, High Council, she said, rising from her seat, there's something unusual about these humans. The chamber fell silent as she activated her own data terminal. They evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme environmental variations. Their history is dominated by near-constant warfare among their own kind. They've adapted to survive conditions that would kill most sentient species in our dominion. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Councillor Thex made a dismissive gesture. Many species have violent histories, Director Vela. It hardly makes them special. There's more, Vela persisted. Their neural architecture is unlike anything we've encountered. They process information differently. They're unpredictable, creative in ways our predictive models struggle to anticipate. High Elder Mira raised a hand, silencing the chamber. Your concern is noted, Director Vela, but unnecessary. The Varaxian Dominion has ruled this sector for 10,000 cycles. We've brought hundreds of species into our fold, willingly or otherwise. She turned to Zeril. Send a diplomatic envoy. If these humans accept our terms of vassalage, we'll welcome them. If not, she left the sentence unfinished. Director Vela sat down, her expression troubled as she added quietly, I believe we should approach with caution. Their communication suggests complex thinking and remarkable adaptability. Her warning went unheeded. 3 days later, the diplomatic vessel Radiant Decree approached the human outpost in the system humans called Proxima Centauri. Ambassador Krolor prepared his standard speech of Varaxian superiority and generous terms of submission. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Chen Wei, met the Varaxians with surprising composure. They listened politely to Krolor's arrogant demands, then responded with unexpected firmness. We appreciate your offer, Ambassador Chen stated diplomatically, but humanity has no interest in becoming vassals to the Varaxian Dominion. We propose instead a mutual treaty of cooperation and shared knowledge. Krolor was stunned by the refusal. In his 10,000 cycles of service, no species had ever rejected Varaxian terms outright. His secondary limbs twitched with irritation. Perhaps I wasn't clear, Krolor said, his translator struggling to convey his condescension. This isn't a negotiation. The Dominion doesn't form treaties with primitive species. You submit, or you will be conquered. Ambassador Chen's expression hardened. And perhaps I wasn't clear either, Ambassador Krolor. Humanity doesn't respond well to threats. The meeting deteriorated rapidly. Krolor, furious at being rejected by what he considered an inferior species, committed a grave error. He ordered his guards to detain the human delegation, intending to force compliance through intimidation. What happened next would be debated in Varaxian historical archives for centuries. The human security detail, seemingly outmatched and outgunned, moved with startling speed and coordination. Before the Varaxian guards could activate their energy weapons, 3 were incapacitated by the humans' primitive but effective projectile weapons. In the chaos, Ambassador Chen and her team retreated to their shuttle, but not before leaving behind a final message. The Varaxian Dominion has made a grave miscalculation. We came in peace, but we will defend ourselves. When news reached the High Council, the response was immediate and overconfident. This insolence cannot stand, High Elder Mira declared. Prepare the 7th Fleet. Show these primitives the consequence of defiance. Only Director Vela urged caution. Their response was defensive, not aggressive. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. Supreme Commander Zerl dismissed her concerns. Their ships are nothing but metal shells with crude engines. Our smallest cruiser could destroy a dozen of them without depleting its energy reserves. The Varaxian 7th Fleet, comprising 30 warships, entered the Proxima Centauri system expecting an easy victory. What they found instead were human vessels arranged in a formation unlike any in the Dominion's tactical database. "What are they doing?" asked Captain Drez of the battlecruiser Inevitable Dominance. "That formation makes no logical sense. It exposes their flanks and creates unnecessary vulnerabilities." Strategic Officer Merak studied the displays with confusion. "I cannot determine their tactical objective. Their formation corresponds to nothing in our combat archives." Zerl's voice came through the communication system. "It doesn't matter. They're primitive vessels with minimal weaponry. Proceed as planned." The Varaxian fleet moved into their standard offensive formation, a perfect geometric arrangement designed to maximize weapon coverage and shield overlap. Thousands of years of warfare had refined their tactics to mathematical precision. Captain Drez opened communications. "Human vessels, this is Captain Drez of the Varaxian 7th Fleet. Your species has rejected the generous terms of the Dominion. Surrender now or be destroyed." The response came not as words, but action. The seemingly illogical human formation suddenly shifted. Smaller vessels broke away at high acceleration, while larger ships adjusted their positions in ways that made targeting difficult. "They're splitting up," Strategic Officer Merax reported with confusion. "They're sacrificing formation integrity." Before Captain Drez could respond, the human vessels executed a maneuver that defied Varaxian tactical understanding. Instead of keeping a safe distance as any sensible species would, several human ships accelerated directly toward the Varaxian fleet. "They're on a collision course," exclaimed Mirax. "It's suicide." But at the last moment, the human ships launched volleys of missiles and altered course with gut-wrenching acceleration that would have killed any Varaxian crew. The missiles, primitive by Dominion standards, nonetheless overwhelmed the Varaxian point defense systems through sheer numbers. Meanwhile, other human vessels had taken positions that exploited gaps in the Varaxian formation, gaps that shouldn't have existed according to their combat algorithms. Somehow, the humans had identified weaknesses in a formation perfected over millennia. "Impossible," muttered Captain Drez as his perfect formation began to crumble. 3 Varaxian vessels reported critical damage. The humans were targeting specific systems, propulsion, weapons, and communications, rather than attempting to destroy the ships outright. On the flagship, Supreme Commander Zerl watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed Varaxian vessels falling out of formation, damaged or disabled by human attacks. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "These are primitive vessels." The answer came from an unexpected source. Director Vela, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet, spoke quietly. "They're adaptable. They don't fight according to established patterns. Each move they make is creative." "Creativity has no place in warfare," Zerl snapped. "Warfare is mathematics, probability, and power." "Perhaps that's true for the Dominion," Vela replied. "But these humans fight differently. They're improvising, adapting to our responses in real time. As if to punctuate her point, alarms blared across the flagship. Somehow, a small group of human vessels had broken through the Varaxian line and were targeting the command ship directly. Evasive maneuvers, Zeril ordered, but it was too late. The flagship shuddered as multiple impacts disrupted its propulsion system. Across the battlefield, 7 Varaxian vessels were completely disabled, and another dozen reported significant damage. The humans, despite their technological inferiority, had achieved what no species had in thousands of years. They had beaten a Varaxian fleet in direct combat. As the human vessels regrouped, a message came through on all Varaxian channels. It was Admiral Helena Reyes of the Earth Defense Force. Varaxian Fleet, this is Admiral Reyes. Your unprovoked aggression has been met with an appropriate response. We disabled your vessels rather than destroying them because we still hope for peace. Return to your territory. If you come back, we won't be as merciful. As the human ships departed, leaving the damaged Varaxian fleet drifting in space, Supreme Commander Zeril turned to Director Vela. His pride shattered. How? He asked simply. Vela's answer was equally simple. We underestimated them. And that was just their frontier fleet. The reckoning. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Varaxian Dominion had never witnessed such chaos. Council members shouted over one another, their usual decorum forgotten in the wake of unprecedented defeat. Supreme Commander Zeril stood at the center, his posture rigid despite the shame of failure. Impossible. Councillor Thex bellowed, his primary limbs gesticulating wildly. A primitive species cannot defeat a Varaxian fleet. There must be another explanation. High Elder Mira, her ancient face lined with concern, raised a hand for silence. The chamber gradually quieted. The facts are clear, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of Varaxian history. Our 7th Fleet was decisively defeated by human forces. Director Vela stepped forward, data projections materializing around her. The humans employed tactics we've never encountered. They didn't follow any predictable pattern. Each ship acted with individual initiative while somehow maintaining collective effectiveness. A fluke, Supreme Commander Zeril insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Their victory was circumstantial, with proper preparation and the full might of the Dominion. We lost 13 ships destroyed and 17 more severely damaged. Vela interrupted, her voice steady. All against vessels technologically inferior to our own. This was no fluke. Strategic analyst Kren, newly arrived from the front, activated his own projection. The humans are gathering forces. They've recalled ships from across their territory and appear to be preparing for continued conflict. High Elder Mira's expression darkened. Then we shall meet them with overwhelming force. Prepare the 1st and 3rd fleets. We will crush this insolent species once and for all. Only Vela dared oppose the consensus. I must formally register my objection. We still don't understand how they defeated our forces. Committing more ships without adapting our strategy is. Your objection is noted and overruled. Mira cut in. The honor of the Dominion demands a response. As the council dispersed, Vela approached Commander Zeril in the corridor. They won't fight the same way twice, she warned. Humans adapt. They learn. That's what makes them dangerous. Zeril stared at her, his pride still wounded. What would you have me do, Director? Propose surrender to primitives. Not surrender, Vela replied quietly. Understanding. I've been studying their history. Do you know what humans did when faced with technologically superior opponents throughout their history? Enlighten me, Zeril said with a dismissive gesture. They changed the rules of engagement. They never fought battles they couldn't win. They created entirely new kinds of battles instead. Admiral Helena Reyes stood on the bridge of the EDF Intrepid, humanity's newest flagship. The holographic display showed the positions of every human vessel in the defensive network they'd established around the Proxima and Ta Ceti systems. They're coming back, she said to her XO, Commander Jackson. And they're bringing everything they have. Jackson nodded grimly. The Varaxians don't take defeat well, it seems. No empire does, Rise replied. But that's exactly what we're counting on. The strategic conference that followed included fleet commanders from every human settlement and orbital habitat. Rise outlined her plan, a strategy so unconventional that several senior officers expressed doubt. With respect, Admiral, said General Santos of the Mars Defense Corps, you're proposing we deliberately expose our flanks and appear vulnerable. I am, Rise confirmed. The Varaxians fight by algorithm, by patterns refined over millennia. They expect responses within parameters they understand. We need to be unpredictable, not just in tactics, but in strategy. Captain Lai of the Lunar Fleet leaned forward. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Even with our unconventional approaches, their technological advantage is significant. Rise smiled thinly, which is why we won't be fighting their kind of war. Operation Hydra begins now. 2 weeks later, the combined might of the Varaxian First and Third Fleets, over 100 warships, arrived at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. Supreme Commander Zeril, personally leading the Armada, was confident in their overwhelming superiority. Scan for human vessels, he ordered. Strategic Officer Marax, newly promoted after the previous engagement, complied. Detecting multiple human signatures, but they're dispersed throughout the system in small groups. No main fleet formation detected. Zeril frowned. They're hiding. Director Vela, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet despite the Council's objections, studied the tactical display. No, she said quietly. They're waiting. For what? Zeril demanded. His answer came moments later as alarms blared across the command deck. Multiple high-velocity objects approaching. Marax shouted. They're mining platforms. Converted mining platforms, their propulsion systems modified for single high-speed runs, hurtled toward the Varaxian fleet. Laden with explosives and radioactive materials from human mining operations, they weren't ships. They were projectiles. Evasive maneuvers, Zeril ordered, but the platforms were moving too fast, their trajectories unpredictable. 3 Varaxian vessels were struck directly. 7 more suffered damage from near misses and debris. The perfect formation of the Dominion fleet shattered as ships broke ranks to avoid the improvised weapons. They're attacking with mining equipment, Marax asked incredulously. No, Vela replied, understanding dawning. They're changing the battlefield. The platforms weren't the main attack. They were the prelude. As the Varaxian fleet scattered to avoid the improvised missiles, human vessels emerged from hiding places throughout the system. They struck rapidly, targeting isolated Varaxian ships before disappearing again. This isn't warfare, Zeril raged. It's chaos. It's adaptation, Vela corrected. They're using our strength against us. The Varaxian fleet, designed for coordinated large-scale engagements, found itself fighting dozens of small skirmishes simultaneously. Their superior weapons and shields meant little when human vessels refused to engage directly, instead striking vulnerable points and retreating before the Varaxians could respond effectively. For 3 days, the Varaxian fleet chased shadows across the Proxima system, losing ships to hit and run attacks and improvise traps. Human vessels would appear, strike with unexpected ferocity, then vanish before the Varaxians could bring their superior firepower to bear. Finally, Zeril ordered a retreat to the edge of the system to regroup. This is madness, he told his command staff. They refused to fight properly. Director Vela couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. They're fighting to win, Commander. They simply rejected your definition of proper. On the 4th day, Admiral Rise executed the final phase of Operation Hydra. The human fleet, which had been fighting in dispersed groups, suddenly converged on the Varaxian position from multiple vectors. They're finally giving us a proper battle, Zeril said with satisfaction, ordering his ships into their optimal combat formation. But the humans weren't playing by Varaxian rules. Instead of engaging the front of the Dominion fleet as expected, the human vessels executed a complex series of maneuvers that seemed designed to draw out the battle rather than win it decisively. "What are they doing?" Merax asked in frustration. "Their tactics make no sense." Vela studied the patterns, her scientific mind racing. "They're not trying to destroy us," she realized suddenly. "They're containing us." Too late, Zerl understood. Scan the system's edge. Now. The tactical display updated to show a massive energy buildup at the system's edge, the direction of Varaxian space. Human engineers had repurposed jump gate technology to create a one-way gravitational disruption field that completely blocked the Varaxian route home. "We're trapped," Merax whispered. Admiral Rice's voice came through on all Varaxian channels. "Supreme Commander Zerl, your fleet is now isolated from Varaxian space. While you've been chasing us across Proxima, other human forces have established similar blockades across all approach vectors to Earth and our colonies." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The mighty Varaxian armada, pride of the Dominion, was effectively stranded. "You expect us to surrender?" Zerl demanded, his voice tight with rage. "I expect you to listen," Rise replied calmly. "Humanity doesn't want war with the Varaxian Dominion. We never did, but we will not be conquered or subjugated." Director Vela stepped forward. "Commander, we should consider their terms." "Terms?" Zerl hissed. "We don't negotiate with equals?" Vela finished for him. "Perhaps it's time we did." The negotiations lasted 3 days. Admiral Rise and Director Vela emerged as the primary architects of what would eventually be called the Proxima Accords, a treaty unlike any the Dominion had ever signed, acknowledging humanity as an equal rather than a subject species. When the Varaxian High Council received the terms, the outrage was immediate. "This is unconscionable," Councillor Fex roared. "Equality with primitives. Restrictions on our expansion. We should send every ship we have and crush them." High Elder Mira, however, had grown wiser. "And lose those fleets as well?" she asked quietly. "These humans defeated our best with inferior technology because they fought differently. Imagine what they might accomplish if truly provoked." The council chamber fell silent as tactical projections showed the potential consequences of continued conflict. "Perhaps," Mira continued, "after 10,000 years of unquestioned dominance, we have finally met a species that demands our respect rather than our condescension." 1 year later, Director Vela stood beside Admiral Rise on the observation deck of the newly constructed Proxima diplomatic station. Below them, Varaxian and human ships moved in carefully coordinated patterns, conducting joint exercises. "Your species continues to surprise us," Vela admitted. "Many in the Dominion believed you would exploit your advantage, perhaps even attempt to conquer our outer territories." Rise smiled. "That would have been the Varaxian way, perhaps. Humanity has already had enough of conquest in our own history. We prefer to build rather than subjugate. A strange concept," Vela mused, "but one I find increasingly compelling." As they watched the ships below, Vela couldn't help but reflect on how completely the Dominion had misunderstood humanity. They had seen crude ships and primitive weapons and assumed inferiority. They had failed to recognize that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their adaptability, their creativity, and their refusal to accept defeat on someone else's terms. The Varaxian Dominion had ruled through superior force for 10 millennia. Now, for the first time, they would have to learn to rule through cooperation and mutual respect, a lesson taught by a species they had once dismissed as primitive. In the vast archives of the Dominion, a new entry was made. "Approach humans with caution. They do not fight as expected. They change the rules." It was, perhaps, the highest compliment the Varaxians could give.